Hello, and welcome to my dining room. This is episode 10 of the Live and Learn Knitting Podcast. My name is Anne, or Annie, and I live on the banks of the Mississippi River in western Wisconsin. And today is Friday, January 12th. I did record an episode yesterday in a hurry, and it was a hot mess. I watched it, and I thought, it was all disjointed, and I kept saying that I don't know, forgetting names, forgetting yarns. It was blather. It was bad blather. I like good blather. And right after I did it, I rushed off to yoga and then came home and had a knitting Zoom with my international friends, and I was reminded that my topic for today, which is socks, sock talk, we'll call it. Socks are, I don't want to say controversial, but sock knitters are very opinionated. We all have our favorite methods of doing making our socks, and we need to remember that however you get to the desired end result is fine. Whether you do double pointed needles or 11-inch circulars or magic loop or 2 socks on 2 circs or the flexi flips or whatever. Knit them flat and seam them up. However you get there, the point is you had fun along the way. And so I wasn't intending to preach on, my method is the best method, but it's such a personal thing with people, with knitters. And so, I need to bear that in mind. We need to bear that in mind, that knitting is for fun and to make things, and to not be so my way or the highway about it. So, because there are definitely things about sock knitting that I don't like, and I kind of do scratch my head. It's like, why do people do this? But that's because they like it. So that's fine. Definitely fine. So I want to talk more about the love of socks. And why I wanted to talk about socks today is because I think you remember last time I said I wanted to get to 9 pounds of yarn knit up before the end of the 2023, and I made it. And one of the things that I finished to make that goal was this pair of socks right here. And I want to show you, here's one sock. And that was the other problem with yesterday's episode. I was right here the whole time. And when I was trying to show stuff and I was dancing it around too much, it was terrible. I was getting seasick. You don't need to see me up that close and personal. So yeah, this is one of the socks. And here is the same sock on a sock blocker. And I haven't washed these. I haven't wet blocked them or anything, but I did put this one on the sock blocker just to show you stretched out. I mean, that's a bit of a difference, how much this leg of this sock stretches open. I'm not going to keep this on this sock blocker because it's the wrong size. This is a vintage sock blocker that I found at an antique store, I think. So there's a pair. They're metal. They are called Queen Dry Right, and they're size 10. And I don't know if that's ladies size 10 or men's, but they're too big for socks that I want to block. And I have a few pair, which I bought them, I maybe thought I could use them, but I realized they were too big. I don't want my socks to be too big for my feet. So they're more for decoration because, I'm a knitter, I'm a maker. I want to have things related to my craft. So I have a few other pair to show this pair has, and these are also too big. They are obviously, I'm guessing, men's sizes on here, because it starts at size 10.5 or 10, and then you can go all the way up to a size 13. So, and this one is, you know, scrunched in a little bit. And these have, yeah, an adjustable piece right here to shorten the foot on there. Again, wire. And I kind of like the wire ones because the air flows through better. You know, there are a lot of wooden sock blockers and they have holes in them, and that lets the air flow through it and dry the socks better. This is another pair that's got a little sort of a ratchet and a rubberized toe. I'm not sure why they needed to put the rubber on there, but fine. That's good. These don't have a... Oh, yeah, they do have a name. They're Lee Rowan. And Lee Rowan, I think that's British again, but I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, again, adjustable, same sizes, 10.5 to 13. So yeah, too big for me, but fun to have around. I have thought about buying a pair of the wooden sock blockers. I don't know how much I'd use them. I like to wash socks, usually in the bathroom sink, about 5 pair at a time, and I just throw them over a line that I stretch, you know, across the shower. That's good enough for me. They block out when they're on my feet. If I wanted them for, you know, fancy sake, maybe I'd buy a sock blocker. I have a template down in the basement because I bought a commercial pair of socks that came on the perfect size cardboard form. And I thought, well, I'll use this and get some really thin wood and use my coping saw and, you know, cut an outline and sand it off. Another DIY project, because who doesn't like to make all of the things, you know? So that might happen in the future. Or I might break down and buy a pair, but they come now with so many intricate and interesting designs. It's hard to choose. I think I have maybe half a dozen different ones favorited on Etsy, and, you know, can't make up my mind. So what do? I don't do anything. But I want to talk a little bit about this sock pair before I go further. This is Knit Circus, and they are a company, if you've not heard of Knit Circus yarns, out of Madison, Wisconsin. They used to have a retail store. Now they're back to wholesale and online website shopping, and they have some of their yarns in local stores and in, you know, probably around the country. But they are famous for their gradient yarn. So most of their, well, I shouldn't say most, but a good majority of their yarn is put up in 100 or 150 gram cakes, and they're caked to show that bullseye pattern of the gradient. So those bigger sizes are more for shawls and scarves and, you know, bigger things. And then they do have some that are put up in 50 gram size, so you get 2 smaller balls that still do this bullseye effect, so you can make a matching pair of socks. I've got, I think this was the only 50 gram, I might have one more 50 gram set of yarn to make another pair of socks, but the other ones that I have are 100 or 150, so they're going to be more for shawls and scarves. Or I do have 2 100 gram balls that are the same, so I could maybe, you know, break those in half and get not, you know, a lesser amount of gradient, but probably still get 2 pair of socks out of that. I might try that. We'll see. We'll see how I like wearing these. I did make another pair of socks out of their yarn. They had a base that was wool and cashmere and thinner stripes. They were called circus stripes, and they are very comfortable. They're precious. I didn't bring them out. I'm not sure why. The table in front of me here is just laden with socks today. I think I might show them all. We'll see. It's overload because I've been knitting socks for many, many years. So that's my first question. Why knit socks in the first place? Well, we as knitters know the answer to that, don't we? Because they're there. Because it's a challenge. I think that's it. A lot of people I know, some people I know have said they wanted to learn to knit so they could knit a pair of socks. Everyone that I've knit socks for has enjoyed wearing them, said that they feel wonderful, and they really do. Back, oh, let's see, where is it? 1996, I put together a display for our local library, and I had several pairs of my socks, and I think I used the sock blockers then to display them, and then probably a dozen or more pair of socks. I had a Gerhardt antique crank sock knitting machine, which I've sadly never been able to figure out how to get it working. It's in the garage, falling apart. I had that. I had a lot of, maybe a half a dozen or more books on socks and how to make socks, and some yarn and that kind of. It did a really nice display. So the local paper did an article on the display and me, and there's a pair of Baltic, I think they were called Baltic socks. They were from a kit from Peace Fleece way back in the early 90s. And those are good socks. They're right now upstairs on the mending pile because the foot blew out from, the foot, it wore out. So I need to mend it because they're comfy. They're warm in the winter. They're a good sock to wear over other socks. But yes, so socks, they're like sweaters for your feet. I was proud of that little catchphrase. And I think that they're just comfy. I think the construction of socks is a challenge, and it's a fun challenge. Just gonna put these on the floor. They're small, they're portable, you can take them anywhere. They're fairly mindless until you get to that heel shaping, and sometimes that's daunting for people. But once you figure it out, it's just magic to make, your tube of knitting shift and change directions and do wonderful things. So yeah, and then you race down the foot and do a little shaping at the toe, and you're done. And then you have to do it again, which is why some people like to do two at a time. For me, when I'm doing, usually the first sock is the hard sock for me, because I'm taking notes and writing down everything I'm doing. And even if I'm following a pattern, I'm taking notes on, if it says knit the cuff for 2 inches, well, how many rounds was that? Tick, 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 and keep track. And then how many rounds was the leg? And I don't always keep good track, so I have to go back and count. And I know some people will put a stitch marker, a row marker every, 10 rows or something, so they don't have to recount. Because on this pair of socks, it was very easy to see stitches and count, but on, a darker pair of socks like this, not so easy. Harder to see. So, and then I like to keep track of how I did my heel shaping, where I maybe stopped in the leg pattern and adjusted so that that's a little more symmetrical, if I could, depending on the pattern. And then what kind of a heel I made. And then again, how many rounds to the foot, and where did I stop with the toe to do grafting. All those kinds of things I like to write down on the first sock, and it just seems to take a little more time then So the second sock is like Zoom for me because I have all of those numbers ready to go and I don't have to figure anything out anymore. So yeah, second sock is usually faster than the first for me. So these were a fun project, and yes, they were so that I could take them along, you know, and have some mindless small project to work on when I was out running around. This also has become my go-to sock pattern. It's a 6-stitch repeat. It's a 4x2 rib. And I used to like stitch patterns that were divisible by 4, so a 2x2 rib or a 3x1 rib. But I like this because the 4x2 gives you a bit more stockinette to work with, but it still does this nice elastic ribbed function, which helps it cling to your leg. So there's a little bit less purling. A sock like, I'll show you this one, a sock like this that's just stockinette, it doesn't cling as well. You know, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't stay up as well. And if there's a part that is, you know, too big, it's too big. Where if this is a bit too big, it still has some elasticity where it's gonna cling better, fit my foot, fit my leg better. And I run that ribbing down the whole, you know, length right down into the toe shaping. And I don't have to put it in the toe shaping. I just sometimes do, sometimes don't. So that's become my go-to sock pattern and sock stitch count number. You know, Andrea Mowry talks about magic numbers for things, and once you find that sweet spot for you, that is something to hang on to and make note of, and easier to adapt, or if you can, adapt someone else's pattern to fit your numbers than to, you know, make a sock using someone else's numbers that isn't necessarily going to fit in the end. There's a little bit of wiggle room sometimes, yes, sometimes no. And I'll show you a pair of socks in a minute that I am not sure, you know, it might have too big of a repeat to make an adjustment on. So all those things are something you need to take into account when figuring out what socks work best for you. So these are the latest ones, and next I'm going to show you the first ones. Well, not the exact first one, because the very first one I made was right after I had learned to knit in the 80s. Yeah, I wanted to jump in and make sock. You know, I had made a few things and, oh, let's try socks. And socks, knitting socks in the round on double pointed needles, that's what taught me or showed me that I was making my knit stitches differently than I should have been, or that they were fine for working back and forth in stockinette, knitting and purling and garter. It was all fine, but I was throwing the yarn with my left hand, and I still do that way. I throw with my left hand, and so the stitches were coming out. The legs were placed differently on the needles. So when I was knitting in the round and poking into the back of the stitch, you know, putting my needle in the way I was doing it for back and forth, it was going into the back of the stitch, and it was making every stitch twisted. And I think I knit about this much of the leg, you know, after the ribbing, and the ribbing was nice and twisted, and the leg was nice and twisted, and it was a singles yarn on top of that, and it was very woolly, very scratchy yarn, and it was torquing because of the singles, which, you know, I didn't know a lot about knitting yarn and ply and the difference between a singles and a 2-ply and anything else, 4-ply. So it was too tight. It was like it would stand up by itself. So I never did finish that, but I learned a lot because I wasn't sure why that was happening with stitches. And when I figured it out and the light bulb went on and I started putting my needle in the front of the stitch when I worked in the round, it was night and day difference. And then I was off to the races, knitting in the round, knitting everything in the round. And again, not necessarily incorrect, but not the result that I wanted. So, I was happy to make that change. And later on, I read an article in Threads magazine, and they described several styles of knitting. And I believe they called that style, at that time, they called that style Eastern European combined, which meant that it was, from the Eastern Europe, the Slavic countries, and the combination was that it was a combination of continental knitting and English knitting. So, yeah, throwing with your left hand. And I know I haven't looked too closely at what Arnie and Carlos are calling Norwegian purling, or, there are a lot of new names coming up for knitting methods now. And I need to study those a little harder and see how similar or different they are than what I do. But it's interesting, yeah, that you can get to that end result of knitting in so many different ways. So yeah, this is the first pair of socks that I made successfully. And look how lovely they still are after 30, 40 years of use. Now, I did have to, I'm not sure if you can see this, this cuff, I did have to replace. There was a hole up here in the ribbing, or somewhere, maybe right below the ribbing, there was a weak spot, and it created a hole. So I took off about this much, and I had, the yarn just fell on the floor, I had some leftover yarn, and look at the difference in, look how coarse this looks, and then how you can't. I wish this was feel-o-vision, because these feel amazingly soft. So once this washes up and blooms, and this is a non-superwash wool, this is a hand wash wool, and it's a sport weight or a DK weight 2-ply. Yeah, it gets really soft. But I did have to, these were knit top down, but I, cut and took the top off and then picked up stitches and knit up to replace the cuff. And yeah, I had a little bit, and I actually have another hank of this yarn, so I might, I don't know, I'll make something. I should make a pair of mittens, because this just feels amazing. They'd feel wonderful. And they've felted a little bit, not a lot. I've got some I'll show you that are a little more felted, but yeah, and it's funny, I was gonna say, I was proud, like, look how well they've held up. And I wore them this week, and I just happened to finally put a hole in the foot right past where I did the heel shaping and put in reinforcement yarn. I always like to try to put in reinforcement yarn in my heels and toes, and usually this is where they wear out, right past that spot. So there are a few pairs of socks, I don't think I have any up here, that I have put the reinforcing yarn all the way down the foot, just for that reason, that I know they're going to wear out. Yeah, they just, the foots get so thin when you walk on them. But yes, this is my first pair and my favorite pair, really. So this is, the next part of this is going to be a lot of show and tell. So these are 3 other pair that are non-superwash wools. And I gotta say, I think these are also more of my favorite than some of the superwash ones, just because they feel so good. Even though they've felted a bit. This is a yarn, Safari, Brunswick Safari. So a yarn, again, from the 80s, 90s. And you can see the reinforcing yarn in the heel and toe. And I would just use thin, you know, I have a lot of yarn for weaving and that coned yarn, cottons and such. So I think this is a 10-2 weaving cotton that I put in here. I took a class once, a workshop on sock knitting when I was starting with socks. And all we did was make heels, all the different, I say all, I think we did 4 or 6 different heel turns. And we tried a different reinforcing yarn in each one. We used dental floss, which I didn't care for at all. I don't think that works very well. We did embroidery floss, which is fine because you could separate that into as many or as few plies as you wanted. And embroidery floss matches. You could find color matches, you know, really easily with all those colors of floss. We might have done sewing thread. We did the woolly nylon that you can buy on little cards to add. We did one other thing. It's been so long ago, but that was a fun thing to do. And I wanted last year to make every pair of socks I made use a different heel, and I didn't. I made 2 heels, and then the 2 heels that I've made I thought, well, I'll start out with what I know, and that's as far as I got, and I didn't branch out and try any other heels, so that was a fail on my part. I still want to try that sometime, or maybe at least do the little heel samples again and see how I like making them and how they fit. Maybe if I made shorty socks doing that, I would be more successful. We'll see. So yeah, Brunswick Safari, and yeah, they're felted, and they're very dense and very warm. They are a kind of a struggle to put on, but boy, once they're on, they feel amazing, and the feet have actually held up much better than the green socks I just showed. And yeah, they feel amazing, and I'd stick with that. This is a yarn from Italy, a Missoni yarn. I had some friends go to Italy in the early 90s, and they brought me back an amazing amount of yarn. So I knit them each a pair of socks, and then I knit myself a pair of socks. And again, they shrunk, they felted, but they feel fantastic. They're starting to wear out a bit on you can see my finger through there. They're starting to wear out on the bottom, but I think I can do some duplicate stitch on there and sturdy that up a bit, which I'm happy to do because these feel amazing. This pair was knit with a vintage sock yarn. I believe it was a Bear brand, Bear or Fleischer, which were the same company, owned by the same family, Ullman, U-H-L-M-A-N, Bernard Ullman. And I was leery of working with this because it was so fine, and it was, I think, called Halanka stretch wool, and it did have a bit of nylon in it. And they're getting thin on the bottom as well, but I can feel the nylon in. I think that they just have worn very well. And for a vintage wool, and a vintage, I say probably from the 50s or 60s, and I knit them in the 90s. And I did, you can see, I did calf shaping on there. Wow, quite a bit. I'm trying to remember if these stay up or not. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've worn them. I'm kind of going through wearing all my socks in the winter. So yeah, I'll have to, next time I put them on, see if they stay up. They're not very tall. I like longer socks generally, but the shorter ones do seem to, stay put a little better. And that's why I like to make the ribbed socks, because I think they stay up better too. But I was reminded last night of, okay, a sock like this that's short and is up your leg, that I don't know if any men still do it, but do you remember seeing, like, it was on a comedy show yesterday that I watched, that, this businessman in his suit, he lost his clothes and all he had on was a shirt and his boxers and then his socks and shoes. And of course he had those leg garters holding up his businessman socks, And I thought, does anybody still wear leg garters? Well, I Googled and they're still for sale. And they actually showed them wearing, that a man could wear those leg garters to hold up his socks. And then they also had stays that held down the tails of the dress shirts. So they're kind of all trussed up under there, with everything. And there was a pair that it was the combination of the leg garters, and then they also went up and grabbed the tails of the shirts. It was this amazing, contraption. And I thought, gosh, yeah, does anybody still do that? Women had garters higher up for stockings, but we wouldn't think of wearing those kinds of things to hold our socks up anymore. I don't think. I sure don't, or wouldn't. So, yeah, I'd rather knit my socks to stay up on their own, I guess. I've got some other vintage yarn that I want to work with in the future. Like this one is Bear Brand Castellane, and that is permanently moth-proofed. It says it's all virgin wool, but it's anti-shrink, permanent fit. So I'm not sure how they made it anti-shrink. I'm interested to try this. This is 2 ounces, so enough for 1 sock. And I don't know if I have 2. I might have to do some, fancy footwork. And, combine some colors together. Here's a Bernat sportsy yarn, washable color, 100% virgin wool, again, 2 ounces. Yeah. Something I found at the thrift store, Here's another one. And I gotta say, they feel really good. So, and this is one of my cherished, is it too precious to knit with? Beehive. 1 ounce, 3-ply. Imported from Great Britain. Peyton's and Baldwin. From Scotland. It does have a bit of moth damage to it. Probably had that. Sad, but I'd be happy to try and work around that. Imported from Scotland, 1 ounce, 100% virgin wool. Yeah, I've got a few beige. I've got natural. Oh, that's really bad. That's really bad. Poor yarn. Poor yarn. So maybe I should knit it up fast before anything bad happens. Anything worse happens to it. Yeah, here's another one. King's Ransom. Why would it be called King's Ransom? That's funny. Floral Tone Zephyr. And I know Zephyr was, I believe, a yarn weight back. I'd have to get out my History of Knitting book and see. I know it tells in there. And I think Zephyr spun or Zephyr was sort of synonymous with a lightweight yarn. Again, 100% virgin wool. This is made of Australian wools in the USA. That's pretty interesting. I like to find out more history about some of these older companies and see. And that's Bernard Ullman. I just happened to find a photo from a woman with the last name of Ullman who did some photos similar to Dorothea Lange, you know, Depression era photos. And I thought, gosh, is she, you know, a counterpart of Dorothea Lange era photography? But her last name was Ullman, and I looked her up, and she was the daughter of Bernard Ullman. And I just thought that was interesting. That's a little aside. So, on to more modern wool. One of my go-to, and I've just been knitting it up, maybe to use it up, but one of my contemporary favorites to use is Peyton's. Again, Peyton's and Baldwin. Peyton's, they're in Canada now, and I think they're part of Susan Bates now. Not 100%, or Bernat maybe. They might all be together under one umbrella. But Croy sock yarn. And look how, this was a striping that they did. And these feel really good after they've been washed. Even though this is a modern yarn, it's got, you know, it's a superwash wool. I think it's superwash. It's machine washable wool with some nylon in it. I think it's 75-25 is their blend. But this, again, this was I think this was knit 3, purl 1 rib. And that's okay. Why I switched to knit 4, purl 2 was because it's easier to divide that for the rib and have it be symmetrical on each side of the heel shaping. I divide it so, you know, so that it actually matches. That was just a little nitpicky thing with me. This, and nobody notices this. I don't even notice it. So why bother to do it? But you can see, like on this side with a 4-1 or a 3x1 rib, that like there's 3 stitches here, and there's only 2, you know, 2 on this side of the heel shaping. Well, big deal. But you know, oh, if you want to make it how you want to make it. So there was that pair. There's this pair that was called Copper Colors, and a fun fall shade there. Yeah, and this one was again I did a 2x2 rib at the top, and then I switched to a 3x3 for the body of the sock. Don't know why. This was one of their stripy colorways that I'd been sitting on for a while, and I thought, yeah, I need to get that one knit up. So I just did this summer. This was when I started doing 4x2 rib. This was a design that I made on my own. This was a solid. This actually doesn't feel, yeah, it feels a little less soft than the multicolored yarn. And I did that King's Brocade texture pattern on that. And just, you know, figured out the numbers for myself. And I like it because it's sort of a homage to Argyle without all of the bobbins and color work of doing Argyle. And I've made a couple Argyle sweaters, but not Argyle socks. No. Regia is another hard-wearing sock yarn. This is my first pair of Regia socks back from late 80s, early 90s, early 90s, I'm going to say, early to mid 90s. And they're holding up very well. Now, I think, no, they didn't get a hole in the foot. I thought they did just recently. I guess they didn't. This pair didn't. they're holding, you know, how many of you, a lot of times on manufactured clothing, it says turn inside out and wash. For the longest time, I washed all of my machine washable socks in the washer with the regular clothes, or altogether, you know, altogether just a load of socks on a gentle cycle. They've held up well, but there is a bit of pilling and bits on the front, but on the inside, it's except for hair, it's pretty good. And I thought, why did I never turn these inside out to wash them? Because they would look absolutely perfect if I had done that, and I didn't. So, lesson learned. And I just wonder how many people do that, turn things inside out to wash. It sure does make a difference on the outer side of the fabric. So this is also a pair of Regia, and I did some, on both of these, I did some calf shaping. This is a little smaller. These fall down. This is a pair, this was a Regia. Not sure, oh, a tiny bit of calf shaping. Longer socks, knee socks. I don't remember if they stay up or not. This is just one more Regia to show you, yeah, stripy colors. I like that, so that's maybe my third favorite. I've got a few of this. It was called Croy Stretch Cotton, and it's got cotton and wool, or stretch sock yarn, cotton and wool and elastic in it, and nylon. And the socks feel great, and they wear very well. But they actually feel a little rough to handle them, but they feel fine on my foot. They were a chore to knit because the yarn with that elastic in was very abrasive as it ran across my fingers. It, you know, when I hold the needle, it just roughed up my the tips of my fingers a lot. So not comfortable to knit with, very comfortable to wear. I have a few pair of those. And then we'll get on to the superwash softy type yarns. This is Happy Feet from Reynolds. They feel great. They don't stay up. They're a puddle, you know. Even though, I mean, this is obviously smaller than my leg. When I put them on, they're fine, but as the longer I wear them, they just floop right down, you know. And I think part of that is the softness of the yarn. Part of it is the being all stockinette in the leg. I want to talk just a minute about, this is a kind of sad story. Look at all that. Look at that. I mean, this was Barocco sock yarn. The leg of it looks, well, fairly okay. It's still got some spots on it too. I am not gonna sit and pick all of that off. What happened was I got a pair of sheets, flannel sheets last year from a store, a brand name pair of flannel sheet set in cream, and I washed them before I put them on the bed, and a lot of lint came off, and I slept in them, and I wear socks to bed because my feet get cold, and I couldn't believe when I pulled my feet out the next morning, they were just covered in white pills from those flannel sheets. It's like, dang it. And they're all over there, and I take a gleaner to that, but boy, I've got better things to do. It just angered me, you know, and it especially showed up on this dark pair of socks. Those sheets they're in timeout. I'm not going to use them this winter unless I absolutely have to. I bought a new pair. I found a really nice set of Eddie Bauer flannel sheets online on clearance and washed those and put them on the bed, and they've been wonderful. And I have not seen pills on my socks in the morning. So, yeah, be careful with your precious socks. That wasn't supposed to happen. So some of these, like this sock yarn that, well, some sock yarns, not this sock yarn, and this isn't. Yeah, this was the Happy Feet. Some sock yarns are too fine, I think, for me. I'm a loose knitter, so I need a sturdier something to knit with, which DK almost would be happier for me to make socks out of. This yarn was Laying Action, and it's very fine for a fingering weight. So I added the reinforcing yarn, which was a thin cotton, the whole sock. I didn't want to detract from this nice sporadic color work going on here, but I knew I did make a pair of this socks in green, and they were very loose and flimsy and didn't stay up, and I don't even know where they are right now. I think they need mending. For summer, I like to make shorty socks. Again, this is that stretch yarn. I don't think this was a European, sorry, I'm not going to remember the name. It's German. I don't think this has the elastic in it, but it has the nylon and the cotton and the wool. And these they're fun to wear in the summer, to keep your feet. Just, my feet still get cold in the summertime. So I think, I just want to show you one more thing. Again, knitting, my headband's falling off. We're going to take it off. Knitting someone else's pattern. This was a beautiful, beautiful color work sock pattern that way too big for me. So why? Look, there's a line here for an afterthought heel. So they're not supposed to be very long socks, ankle, mid-calf sock, but way too wide, because look, here's a sock that I wear, and look how much more leg that is. That's a lot. So there's no way these are going to stay up. Even though they might fit on my leg when I put them on, they're going to fall down. This yarn is Stahl Saka. It feels a little more rustic than, say, this, which, is the superwash merino. So maybe it would work, but I think I'm trying to decide what to do with these. If I'm going to continue and make, this is only the first sock, so continue and make the second sock and see, or rip it out and make something I know will fit. And I think that's the way I'm leaning, is rip it out. We'll see. And I've got a few other things here on the table, nothing real exciting to show. So I want to talk a little bit about books, where to find good patterns. I think we make up our own, it's do your own thing, but if you need some pattern assistance, I think this is interesting. In these vintage pattern books, this is Spinnerin Hand Knit Accessories from 1953, was it? Yeah, 1953. They have got a whole section of socks in here. Look at those. And there's your argyles and, different things. These are all the fancy ones. They also have plain ones and cables and, here, traditional, So, a lot of times in these old vintage books, and here's some, the pair in the center has Angora cuffs, really super fancy. And I did that once with a pair of, it was the cotton acrylic blend for the foot, but for the cuff I used that fun fur kind of top, that flashy stuff, that fringy, frilly stuff. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, I made that for the cuff. They were fancy, fun socks. Those were a gift. So they have things like, they call it in these vintage books, family classics. And then they do this where they have a chart and you pick which size you want to do. And then you have your numbers and your lengths all in this table. And so you follow the text and plug your number in as you go along. And I've always wanted to do that. Follow one of these and make one pair in each size, just for fun. So that might be a challenge for me for 2024, to actually do that with the same yarn and yeah, just see the different sizes. And I can give them, you know, it's a good thing to have for a gift. Here's socks that grow, and those stripes are strategically placed so that if you need to lengthen the sock as your child grows up, you cut where that contrasting stripe was and then knit up or down depending on which thing you're lengthening. So that's kind of clever. Or you might just want to knit a whole new pair of socks. Anyway, these vintage books, don't discredit them. They have good information in them, and you can find them online or thrift stores or, you know, different places. But for history, Nancy Bush, Folk Socks. This book is from 1995, and she has a really good section in here on, you know, the history of socks and, you know, sock knitting in Great Britain, the woman on the seawall, the tools that they used. Where was, oh, here, the waist hooks, so that you can hang your ball of yarn on your waistband of your apron or your dress. And I love the history of knitting and its uses in that. So now here's someone wearing, you know, very gartered, a lot of ties with these socks. It says, oh, I don't know where Parnuma is. I'd have to read this harder. But yeah, so they had them all tied up and tied on. And just, but besides that, then she goes into, you know, basic construction and basic heel varieties, lots of, you know, the heel variations, many of them. And this was one of the books I was going to use for my trying out all the different heels, all the different toes. And then even now, I mean, this book is, you know, 1995, there's so many new heel variations, the Flegel heel and the Fish Lips Kiss heel, and oh, it just goes on and on. New things get invented all the time. So, and then she's got a lot of really good patterns, and I've made some of these, and again, this is where I started becoming a little disenchanted because, yeah, I put in the effort to make the beautiful sock, and the beautiful sock didn't fit. And I was being a blind follower to the pattern, and that just didn't work for me. So we all need to find that sweet spot of making something that fits us and, you know, adapting a pattern to fit. Ann Budd, sock knitting masterclass. This has a CD in the back. A lot of, again, construction information. Kate Atherley, the custom sock book, Designing Your Own Sock. I don't have that book yet. I kind of stopped buying sock books because I had so many. Toe-up socks from Wendy Johnson, Wendy Knits. So I haven't bought Kate's book, but I need to check it out from the library and look at it and see if it's something I need to add to my shelf. It probably is. Good reference book. So that's just a little bit about socks. There's so many ways to get to good socks, and If you haven't knit socks, you need to try them. They're great. And if you have, please share with me what you like about knitting socks. So we're getting up to an hour here. Think I'm done talking about socks. I could go on for days. This was much better though, as far as cohesiveness and having a point to it, that socks are wonderful. So with that being said, I'm going to do the drawing for last time's giveaway, episode 9's giveaway, which if you remember was the mini skein set of Swanyo Tweed and the Knitting Journal and the Elizabeth Zimmerman Knitting Almanac. And I had more entries than, I think this was maybe the most, but it's still not a whole lot. So there are still good odds if you enter the drawings. You've got, you know, a good chance of winning. And the winner of this is Karina from Pennsylvania. And Karina, I will get in touch with you and get your mailing address and send that out to you. And thank you for watching the podcast. And now I am going to have a giveaway for this episode as well, because I do have a lot of sock yarn and I'm never going to be able to knit it all up. So I think it's only fair I share it with you. I did just start a new pair of socks because I needed something, again, to be on the go with. And it's a nice small project, and that's kind of fun, huh? I like how it's turning out. This yarn is Shopple Boots, and it's interesting because it is, oops, that's not the page here. It's 44% superwash wool, 42% cotton, and 4% nylon. And it doesn't have elastic in it, so it's not that stretchy, springy stuff. It's feeling pretty good so far. It does feel a little crunchy. I think it's going to soften up nicely after it's washed the first time, because in the hank it feels soft. But yeah, it's got a bit of cotton. It's got a nice color variation to it. To me, it's kind of reminding me of the park, the local state park we have here. You know, there would be picnic tables in that brown color, and the gray is the road, and the green is, there's a bit of green in there, which is also the picnic tables and the forest and leaves. It's just very woodsy colorway. I don't know if they name their colorways. I think they just give them numbers. But anyway, doesn't that look parksy, woodsy? So I have, I think, 3 hanks of this, and I for sure only need 1 or maybe 2, depends on how long I make these. So I'm giving 1 of those away. This, I made this pair of socks, and I told you many times, green and blue is my favorite combo, color combo. So I have 3 pair, here's green and blue, you know, of green and blue socks now, at least 3 pair. So I don't need another pair of green and blue socks, but here's green and blue sock yarn. This is Ba La Jolla, and it's very soft. It's superwash merino, 100% superwash merino. This color is called Brazilian Emerald, and it is very soft. And if you didn't use this for socks, this would make an excellent scarfy, you know, hitchhikery, shawlette kind of project as well, or put it in one of those multicolored shawls that takes 5 skeins. You know, you could do a lot of things with this. You could do a lot of things with this too. This might be good. If I have some left, which, you know, or the others, I need to start trying to make gloves, because that's really what I need. Make what you need and what you want. Also, this book, Favorite Socks. These were patterns that were put in the Interweave publications, Interweave Knits and Spin-Off and Piecework. And so they collected a bunch and put them together in a book. And I liked it. I liked the book. There are 6 new patterns in here that were not put in magazines. So you've got some old and some new to try out. Very fun. And then the last thing is a little post-it note pack, you know, a little to keep notes on your patterns with, and it says Live, Learn, Knit. There you go. So that'll be the drawing for next time. Please enter by sending an email to livelearnknit@gmail.com. And you can put giveaway in the subject. And if you want to put something in the message, tell me if you've made socks and if you like that or not. What's your favorite go-to sock method, or what designer you like for socks. And please enter by Tuesday, January 23rd. I know I'm a day late today, and I'm trying to decide if 2 weeks is working out for me for timing. I want to keep it that way for now. But yeah, I didn't plan ahead very well, and so yesterday was just it was rushed. I'm sorry. So I want to have something that's more pleasant to watch than chaos. So that's it for today. We are in the middle of a bit of a snowstorm. We're supposed to get anywhere from 5 to 9 to 12, 13 inches. Nobody knows yet. It's very fine, light snow right now. It looks like maybe we've gotten 2 inches so far, and it's going to snow all day and all night, they say, unless it shifts. And then next week it's going to be sub-zero. Like the highs are single digits. I think on Monday the high is going to be 1. So winter's here, and it's time to wear socks and put on all the socks and all the warm woolens and make a fire. There's the, whoops, right there you can see the smoke, the chimney of the wood-burning stove, which just warms this room up amazingly. I love it. So warm winter fires and knitting, what's better than that, you know? Definitely. So everyone, have fun with your knitting. Stay warm. Stay cool if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. You in Australia, I know you watch me. Yeah, just enjoy. Knit some socks. And take care, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.